Hey, what's up everybody? Renee here. This time with another Q&A session. This time it's for Inside Out 2. I had the privilege of checking out a special event once again at my favorite place, the Museum of Moving Image here in Queens, New York, and we were treated to a special preview of Inside Out 2 where we saw the first 35 minutes of the movie. Afterwards, there was a nice little Q&A session with Pete Docter, who is actually the director of the first Inside Out. Now, currently, he is the chief creative officer at Pixar, and he shared some insights with us on the making of this movie, some of the things that they thought about, and some of the things that they considered as far as what to include and why he thinks that this movie is going to be special for everyone who gets a chance to see it. I'll tell you this, I was very skeptical of a sequel to Inside Out because Inside Out is a very beloved movie, but after seeing this first 30-minute preview, it had me very much excited for checking out the rest of the movie, and I think this is going to be a big one for Disney and Pixar, and I think they know it. So if you want to check out my review of Inside Out 2, make sure you subscribe to the channel because I will be planning to review this movie on Friday here on the channel. But before that, you can check out this nice little Q&A session with Pete Docter here, taken from the Museum of Moving Image. So I hope you enjoy, and let me know your thoughts in the comments if you had a chance to see Inside Out 2 yet. No spoilers, don't spoil anything for everyone, but enjoy this Q&A session with Pete Docter, CCO of Pixar. Thanks, everyone.
What'd you think so far?
Are we watching something chronological?
That's called baiting, yeah.
It's baiting.
Chronological?
Is this from the beginning of the film, what we watched, or is it a segment of?
No, this was from the beginning up till a little after Act 1 break, so.
Just want to make sure, yeah. We talked about this a little bit in advance, how for Inside Out, I assume you've all seen Inside Out, love Inside Out, how there is, in a sense, a cliffhanger, that there is the puberty button that shows up there, and you're like, oh, what's next? But you actually hadn't planned.
No, we just, we thought it was funny that Joy says that at the beginning. What's Joy? She's 11 now, what could happen? And at the end she says, she's 12 now, what could happen? How little she's learned, you know. It just seemed funny and appropriate for that character.
Yeah. So when did the idea of Inside Out 2 come about?
Well, we had, I mean, with all our films, we don't really ever plan for sequels. All of them are just trying to be as good as we can get them and self-enclosed and tie them in a bow and give them to the audience. And so it wasn't really until 3-4 years after the film came out, it was in January of 2020 that I went to Kelsey Mann, who's the director of this film, and said, you know, I think there might be more to play with in this world, because it's inside a mind, which is, you know, we built all of the galaxy for WALL-E. We built the entire ocean for Nemo, but the biggest set we had ever built was inside the girl, an 11-year-old girl's brain. And we thought, all right, there's more to play with in there.
Yeah. And so, but she hadn't directed a feature before.
No, and Kelsey's actually deceptively a guy, but
sorry.
Yeah, he had not directed a feature. He had a story on Monsters University as well as Onward, but this is his first gig.
He did animation work, but then became more of a story person.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Story.
So that collaboration, why Kelsey was turned to do this? Why did you step back from the writing directing aspect of this?
Well, I had been asked to step into this role of chief creative officer, which it turns out to be a kind of a full-time job. So I was unable to kind of step back in here. And really, I mean, I don't want to sound disinterested, but I really love originating stuff, and sequels are too hard. You have all these rules that you came up with for the first movie that were really built for that movie, for that story. And then you go to a sequel and you've got to play by the rules that you made 10 years ago, and it's really difficult. But Kelsey did a fantastic job, and I ended up kind of stepping in towards the end. We had the actors strike, which was huge. Probably everybody knows, but the way we work is to animate. First we record the dialogue, well, first we write it, and then we record the dialogue with actors, and then the animators listen to that track as they're creating their performance. So we were at a stalemate. We could not move forward because the actors were on strike. So we were kind of trying to be as clever as we can, do all the scenes with no dialogue or over the shoulders where you wouldn't see the mouth moves. And when it finally broke, we had so much backlog of material that I ended up helping out, and I was directing one group of animators while Kelsey was directing another group of animators. So it was really fun.
But so you talked about how in order to do a sequel, you have to kind of play by those rules. But it looks like from what we're seeing, there's already kind of a lot of fun being had to break a bunch of rules, in the sense set new set of rules with new characters, etc. But I'm curious about, in particular, when the films take that like a long time to make with the animation process, how, like, I'm sure that technology has changed since the last film. So how do you continue, how do you maintain the continuity when your tools have changed?
Yeah, they keep upgrading all the software to the point where when we started this, they're like, we don't think we can actually do joy and anger and sadness anymore. The technology we use to make all the little points, that doesn't work anymore. I'm like, oh, great. So it took a small team, a bunch of time to be able to do it again. Yeah, there's this myth that we use sometimes, the digital backlot, as though everything we build is just back there in the computer and we can call it up anytime. Not actually the case. It keeps changing and upgrading. And even working on a film, you have to kind of cement the technology at some point. You're like, okay, we're using what we have today. We know it's going to keep growing, but we can't keep changing because we got to make the movie. So it's tricky.
And I'm saying this just because I have friends that work with, on films with a lot less technology involved. But did you have to sort of like make sure that there were no automatic updates in certain shoots?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about working at Pixar, the people who are writing all the programs, or the majority of them, are on site, on staff. So if something breaks, you can call up, Susie, and be like, "What's going on?"
So let's talk a little bit about the new emotions and how those came to be chosen, and also the casting process for those emotions.
So this goes back, okay, at the beginning of Inside Out 1, we first did research, which I think on every film we've done, that's kind of where you start, because I thought, okay, emotions, that'll be great for animation. What are they? How many are they? What do they do? Why do we have emotions? So we went to a bunch of experts. Turns out, well, the guy we talked to said there were 27 different emotions. So we initially tried in the first film to have all 27 in there, and it got horribly confusing. So we stripped down to really what it was is me just going through and going, which one seems the most fun as an animator? I'll choose these 5. Turns out those are the most universally agreed upon of all, because depending on who you talk to, there are a different number or different kinds of emotions. Different psychologists think different things. So anyway, we had those 5. And then when this one started up, Kelsey started playing with a bunch of different emotions. There's one we tried in the first film called Schadenfreude, which is taking pleasure in someone else's pain. And we thought it was very funny. We had a gag where Fear banged his head and Schadenfreude jumps in and goes, "Ha ha, your cries of pain amuse me." Of course, German, I don't know. So, but it didn't work in the first one, and it didn't work in this one because really, if you'll notice, all the emotions we chose are the socially aware emotions, like embarrassment, envy, all the things that really had to do focused on Riley's story, which is, she's grown up. So it was really, I don't want to go on too long here, but I always thought as a kid that the way it worked is that these creators would have these ideas, and somebody like Walt Disney would just be like, Dumbo, and it would be all there in his head, completed, and he would just tell somebody what to draw. And really what happens is you have a little mushy blob of an idea, and then somebody else has an idea that adds to it, and it starts to grow, and then you have to take parts away. And it's a very iterative process. So like this movie was a 4-year from beginning to end. Inside Out was 5 years from beginning to end. It's constantly being rewritten. And so a lot of that is, even the casting choice, back to your original question long ago when I started talking, it's really evolution. You have to find it. Yeah.
And so in terms of the cast here for this, when does that come into play? You start in 2020. When does that get cast, and when does that recording happen?
Yeah, so again, to make a short answer long, we start out by writing, and a lot of, that's like script form, but for us it's also drawing. So writing is like making comic book versions of the movie with our own dialogue and our own temporary music and sound effects, and that way we can test the whole thing out. We sit in a screening room just like this. We watch the whole movie before we made it. It's all drawings. And then we say, well, that sucked. Let's go back and rip all the stuff out and start again. And we do that about 7 or 8 times. Casting usually comes in around screening 5-ish. So it's usually when we have the character established, the designs are done, and then we start shopping around for actors. And usually the way we work, we have a casting department. So they watch movies and shows, and they strip the dialogue off, and then they come to us and they're like, all right, here's actor 1. And we don't know who it is. And we just look at our design, our model of whoever it is, and we go like, and it looks like that person fits the suit, who is that? And then we'll reveal the actor. So it's really blind casting based on what we think we need for the movie.
And once the actor is cast, that doesn't affect the drawing at all, or it does?
It does horribly, yeah. I mean, well, I say that horribly, it's actually a good thing, but it changes it a lot. Like, for example, people will say, oh, Mike Wazowski looks so much like Billy Crystal. Like, how is that a thing? Right? Especially for Billy Crystal, it's gotta be an insult. But what happens is, when the actors record, they're in a gray room with a microphone, usually by themselves, which is gotta be really hard. But we videotape them as well. So the animators will listen to the dialogue and they'll maybe go look at the video and steal little ideas. And so it ends up affecting the characters. And of course, the actors bring their own ideas to things. In this case, Amy Poehler, you know, she's not only such an amazing actor, but a great writer and improviser. And so she just, time and again, would come up with way better lines than we'd written. And so it was an absolute joy to work with her. And the whole cast is just so well assembled. Everyone is, I mean, on the first one, of course, Bing Bong in the first one, he's not in this movie, but Richard Kind, when he would blow a line, he would be like, and he would say, oh, sugar. I was like, oh, that is so in character, even when he's not in character. Everybody in the movie is just really well cast.
I'm curious about the relationship between the psychology and psychologists and the making of the film. How much are there consultants involved there at some early stage or throughout?
Yeah, at the very beginning of the first one, it happened to be one of the premier psychologists who studied emotions. Dr. Paul Ekman was right there in Berkeley, where we're in Emeryville, just in the Bay Area. And so we brought him over. He suggested another guy, Dr. Keltner, and they became very primary to the film, and this one as well. Although this one, as you know, anxiety comes in, and there's another, I can't remember her name, I only met her once, because, you know, as I say, Kelsey is directing, but we try to base as much as we can about behavior, even writing. You know, when you really think about why do we have anger? You know, I thought at the beginning, oh, it's probably something that I want to avoid. I'll say something I might regret later. But as it turns out, anger is triggered by unfairness. So it's an emotion that's actually very helpful for us individually, and for us as a society. It could motivate us to help refugees in other places in the world because we feel like they are getting a raw deal. So it's a really, of course, beneficial emotion, like all of them. All of these guys have something helpful for us. We just have to know why they're there and what they're doing. And that was super helpful for us, even in the writing, to some degree in the design of the characters. Having that research at our fingertips was really helpful.
I remember feeling this way after the first film and watching it again with these folks here. That satisfaction and the kind of joy that you get seeing your own emotions kind of play out. It's like, oh, that makes too much sense. Of course she's going to say that next. Of course she's going to do that next. And have that sort of externalized. It's almost like it kind of rings a bell in our heads, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's the joy of this film and why we went to a sequel, was because there's something familiar about it. I think that was the big job on both films, is to take these very abstract things of like memories. What does a memory even look like? You know, our first version of that, Ronnie Del Carmen, who was boarding it, he was the co-director on the first one. He drew them as jars, like you could open them up and the memory would come back out and you could put them back in. And as we turned out, we just did these spheres, which, anyway, my point is just that we're trying to capture these rather abstract ideas in a way that everybody can get, that feels correct, hopefully. Yeah, it's a challenge, but fun.
And just one last for me, and then maybe a few for the
Yeah,
audience.
great.
But Dave Goelz and Frank Oz are characters in this film. They play, Frank plays Dave, and Dave plays Frank.
Right.
And we're, of course, using a moving image. We have an exhibition dedicated to Jim Henson. Just curious about casting them in the first place and the kind of the relationship that maybe your work has to Jim Henson.
Yeah, I mean, I of course grew up on Jim Henson's work and love it. And so when living in Oakland, we got to know Frank Oz's father. And then Frank.
Who's a very famous puppeteer.
Yeah. So that was a thrill to meet Frank, and I thought maybe I can convince him to be. He was in Monsters Inc. He's the assistant to Randall, the bad guy, in that. And then I thought, I should bring him back here. So it was him, and I don't think we had cast the other guard, and I was trying to just help him out by acting against him, and I'm way too slow. So Frank was delivering great stuff, but I just couldn't keep up, and I thought, you know who we should cast opposite him is Dave. And at that point, they hadn't worked together for like 12 years. But we brought him into the recording studio, and it was like they picked up from yesterday, just started harassing each other, insulting each other, and we had a whole script written in the first one. If you remember the first one, there's a bit where Joy is sneaking down to the is it subconscious or unconscious? I can't even remember from the movie. But either way, there's two guards there, and they have to get through them. And we had a thing written, but Frank would say, Dave, say something just to get us going. And Dave would say, like, my hat feels loose. And then they would improv. And then they worked into the stuff we had written, but we thought their improvs are funnier than what we wrote. So that's how it worked out.
And obviously, like, you kind of want more because they're so funny. But what's so great about it is whenever they kind of come in, it's as if they've been going on their own for hours. You just kind of get a snippet of whatever they're
I don't know what the story is, how they worked from being guards there to being guards here. They probably rotate around, or maybe they got fired, I don't know.
All right, we have time for a few questions if folks have. Right here?
In a recent article, you mentioned that directors will not be including autobiographical inspiration in Pixar movies to focus on appealing to a wider audience. How do you plan on balancing having a wide range of viewers and keeping your movies emotional and personal?
Good question. Did everybody hear that? She's talking about, I think it's a Bloomberg article where I said something about, apparently, being less autobiographical. And I think that's maybe a little bit mangled in the article. It was really just that we want to make sure that our movies are universal. And in most cases, the way we find things to be universal is to be very specific, which is kind of counterintuitive. You'd think if I make this character broad enough and maybe bland enough, everyone will find their own way in. And it's really the opposite. The more specific I can make this character with more details, people seem to connect more. I think what I was wanting to make sure, though, with our movies is that we do find that universal within it. There are some things that happen to you that only happen to you, and when you tell the story, other people go, But there are other things that happen to you, and you tell the story, and people go, oh yeah, it totally happened to me. Those are the kind of things that we're looking for, that we make sure that what we're doing is both specific, but in so being very universal.
More questions? Back in center here? Yep. Hold on, right in the very back. Yep. Yeah.
Doctor, thank you so much for this opportunity. I have these amazing, my film students from across the street from Frank Sinatra High School, School of the Arts, as a sophomore film class.
Hi, students.
And what's really cool we're actually in our class right now, we're doing trailer remixes. And so we are taking movies and we're remixing them into different genres. So some of them are taking like Monsters University or like other Pixar films and totally taking them and making them a whole new genre, which I think is really cool. So we got the opportunity, I love the fact that you come and check out your film and also see you. My question is, a lot of them wrote about this, I had them come up with questions, and you just talked about like the personal and how it's unique to individuals. I'm wondering if you could talk about which of your films that you directed is the most personal and why. Like, you've got the characters in Monsters Inc. and it's like how, but then Up and so like all these amazing characters you've tracked over the years in your films, which of them is most relatable for you, and if you wouldn't mind sharing, why?
Well, first of all, it's really cool you're doing the trailers because that shows really the power of film. You can take something and use it in a totally different way and make people freaked out and scared about something that was supposed to be joyous and happy or whatever. And it really shows the power of filmmaking, the juxtaposition of images and the power of sound and all these things. So that's really cool. In terms of personal, I struggle to answer that because in some way every one of the characters I've made is very personal. Monsters Inc. might just springs to mind as something that when I was making it, my wife and I was here, Amanda, had our first kid. And so when Nicholas was born, I was like, great, I have to get back to work. But I was so drawn to be at home at the same time to see this miracle of a little blob starting to look around and be aware. And so I was really struggling with both being a parent and loving the work that I do. And I think that kind of is at the heart of that character, of really loving his job, and then with this kid, even though in his case he's freaked out, which I wasn't really, well, a little bit. I remember when he came home, I was like, he's gonna be a middle schooler someday. It kind of made me worried, but you guys are cool though. That's all good.
So yeah, there's a question right here, the young person that I. Yep.
Okay, why did you choose ennui instead of boredom?
Why choose ennui instead of boredom?
We thought ennui, well, really the answer is Riley is growing up. She's becoming more sophisticated. We wanted to show that maybe some of the emotions speak two languages. So joy is kind of old school. She's like your parent trying to figure out how the iPhone app works, you know. I don't know, what? So it's really, Joy is obviously the main character, but we wanted to put her at a disadvantage. So as much as we could bring from the other characters to make her, to kind of knock her off her balance, that was what we were thinking. Plus it's a funnier word.
Well, I mean, but joy is like the only really strong coded positive emotion. Like the entire fleet is really, in a sense, in opposition to. So she really has a lot to contend with.
Yeah, although, look, if you look through the list of emotions, she kind of is the only positive one.
I was being polite. Yeah, she's the only one.
Yeah, but again, all of them have a good reason. I mean, even anxiety, which seems like a negative emotion, and spoiler alert there, she kind of becomes the antagonist. We can probably tell that. But she has her positive aspects, which we talk about in the movie. There's a reason. I think if we didn't have a little anxiety, maybe we wouldn't study for tests tomorrow or plan for when my mom's coming over in a week or whatever. You know, I think a lot of times anxiety, though it feels negative, it can drive us to do positive things, which is true of most of these.
And makes so much sense as the driving force for a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
More questions right here. Yep.
Hi. First, I'm wearing my Rebecca Hook up necklace. It was my boyfriend's first gift when we started dating.
Cool.
And I do want to ask, outside of Disney and Pixar, are there any other animated films like recently that you would consider favorites of yours, or that you think have had a great impact on animation in general?
Recent films that have influences on animation for you.
Well, I mean, most of us at Pixar are huge fans of Hayao Miyazaki, you know, Spirited Away and Totoro. Those are just amazing movies. There was a film that I don't know many people saw called The Red Turtle, which is a beautiful movie, and I cried like a baby, not understanding why I was even crying until I had a little while to think about it. And Michael Docter, the director of that, is amazing filming. There's a lot, and it's also interesting because I think a lot of stuff is kind of tending to be more on streaming and TV, whereas I'm hoping we can continue to kind of push the envelope of what film animation has kind of become. I think it's gotten a little bit stuck, and I'm guessing people are looking to see new stuff. So that's what we're trying to do. We have a couple films in the works. It'll be a few years till we get to see them, but they're really exciting and look entirely different storytelling, and so that's what we're trying to do.
You talked about universality, and I feel like the commonality between what you're doing at Pixar and say Jim Henson, but also Miyazaki, the Studio Ghibli work, is that though they're obviously super successful with younger audiences, they're sort of an all ages appeal, like almost like a built-in somehow everyone wants to be in a room with those films.
Yeah, well, just like Jim Henson was like, I don't know if I want to do Sesame Street because it might label me as a kid's thing. We never think of our movies as being for kids. We're making them for ourselves. We're aware that kids will see them, but it's got to have something in there that makes me interested enough to stick with it for 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, so really at a base level, I think that's what I'm looking for most and primary is what is the sort of human experience that I can relate to and talk about that'll be interesting and connect with people. And then along the way we put in, you know, fart jokes. Well, we've had very few fart jokes, but slapping and, you know, anything physical, verbal humor, things that hopefully will widen the appeal and make it, everybody will like it. I hope.
Physical stuff always works.
Yeah.
Work with, right here, young man.
Will there be like any new emotions that like appear, like, or will it just keep getting more crowded, or like, will you get rid of some of the emotions?
Will there be added emotions as we go?
Except
Or?
when she dies.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that would be an interesting one. Maybe that's Inside Out 3. Riley kicks the bucket. Yeah, no, it's a good question. We have sort of hinted at it. As you saw, there's Nostalgia who comes out and says, I'll just be downstairs if you need me. So there's kind of an implied area where other guys hang out. They could show up at some point. Who knows?
I love how it's like nostalgia is not actually that far away. It's probably like maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Let's see. Right here behind the one in green. Yep.
So, will any of the characters have their own island, and will we ever see a character that comes from an island be actually a main character?
Will any characters get their own islands, and will any islands become characters?
That's a good question. It's not impossible. So far, the main characters have all been from headquarters, being emotions. There was an early version of this where she wasn't from an island, but there was a woman who was in charge of gathering ideas she went fishing for ideas. And so she was one of those sort of bean-shaped characters. Oh, you know what else? I think we've talked about this. I think it's okay to talk about. We have a streaming series coming out in the next year, and that one is really about Riley's dream production. So the main character is one of the directors who works in dream production. So look for that one.
Love dream production. That's fantastic. Right.
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm a huge Pixar fan, lifelong fan. The first movie I ever watched was Monsters, Inc. So thank you for that. And thank you for being here. I wanted to say that I think what makes Pixar so special and unique is that a lot of their films are these original concepts for stories that have their own worlds and their own characters in them, and they feel really expanded and grounded in that sort of world. And I was wondering if you're looking to create something yourself, if you're looking to create your own kind of story with your own characters in your own world, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to do something like that? And what perhaps like in this, because I know in this industry there's a lot of focus on pre-existing characters that have already had their stories in their own franchises, and what are your general thoughts about that?
So advice for creating your own character and own world that's original and not, somebody else's idea.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is kind of like I was talking about where I had this idea Walt Disney just had the idea of fully formed Dumbo. That's not true. So I would advise you to basically stage the play as many times as you can and then listen to the audience. So if there's any way you can even verbally tell the story to other people and watch when they sort of drift off and look at their watch, like what's engaging people and what's not. There was long ago, which you can probably learn about upstairs, there was this idea of vaudeville, and a lot of the early film acts were actually pulled from actors who developed it in front of audiences for years and years and years, and they honed it, and then by the time they went on film, it was this well-oiled machine. Very seldom do you see anybody who gets it right the first time. It's always something you have to do over and over and over, and so iteration, I think, is a huge thing. And being willing and clever enough to listen, because the other mistake a lot of times people make is they pitch it, and somebody gets bored, and they're like, well, they just didn't understand, this is actually really good, but they didn't get it. So you really have to have the bravery to listen and lean forward and go like, okay, I'm wrong. There's something about the way I'm either telling this story, or maybe the root idea of it is just not clicking for people. How can I change that around? So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind.
Just one more, I don't want to be very selective. Sorry. Go ahead, right here. Yep. Cool.
Were any of the emotions based off any of the actors that were working?
Were the emotions based on the actors that were chosen for them? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, good question. Joy, for sure. Amy Poehler influenced a lot. Sadness, we had initially thought that she would just cry all the time, and then when we worked with Phyllis Smith, who does the voice, she did this really funny insecure thing, which you see even here, where she says, "You want to go downstairs?" And she's like, "Yes." I mean, no. I mean, I don't want it to burn to the. I don't want to burn it to the ground. So we really changed the character a lot based on the way Phyllis started to play things, and that's true with the new characters too. Maya Hawke, as soon as we started working with her, realized, man, she can read really fast. So we would give her these little bits where it was just sort of so fast, and that feels like anxiety. Who's like, I'm thinking so fast I can't keep up with myself. So a lot of times the actors, if we cast them correctly, they end up changing the way the characters are playing. That's for sure.
So can you preview just a little bit of some of the things you're allowed to tell us about that are coming down the pike?
Yeah.
And also, so you're not going to be directing for a while, but also maybe give us a sense of maybe, is there somewhere down the line that you'll be taking that home again?
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's fun making these. Being back in the making of here was a real joy. Haha. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, next we have a film called Elio. It's about a little kid who is accidentally chosen as the leader of Earth, and he's abducted by aliens. So that's really fun. We have Toy Story 5 coming out in a little bit. Yes, it's true.
That's a genuine.
What? And the guy who's directing it, Andrew Stanton, was a writer on all of the other Toy Stories, and so he's doing a great job, along with another director named Kenna Harris, who's they are doing a great job as well. So then I already spilled the beans about dream production. We also have another streaming show called Win or Lose, which comes out this fall, late December, I think. And those are both Disney Plus shows. So, and there's a ton more that I can't talk about that maybe we'll come back at some point.
Well, the film premieres theatrically on the 14th of June. Respect that embargo in terms of social media and all, in terms of...
Well, you can always say you liked it if you
Who's that?
Yeah.
It was so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.